I had been living a life I believed was steady and joyful until it all collapsed in a single moment. Last Friday, my world broke apart when my fiancé walked into our home with another man and casually said, "We were going to tell you eventually." I stood frozen as I saw him sitting beside her on our bed, close enough to show they were more than friends. He smirked at me, making the pain even worse. "Guess you're not good enough," he sneered. I didn't yell or lose control. I simply packed a bag, grabbed what I needed, and walked out. For the next few days, her calls and messages were constant. At first, she raged at me for leaving without a word, then shifted to confusion, and finally begged me to return. She called it a mistake, but how could I believe her after she had been hiding an affair for months while I was planning our wedding? I couldn't process how the person I loved most had been sneaking away with someone else. I stayed at my sister's place that weekend. She was incredibly supportive, giving me space but also helping me manage my emotions. I took time off from work to sort things out. I contacted a lawyer about the apartment lease and later spoke with the landlord. He explained I could break the lease if I found someone to replace me. That left my ex to figure out how she'd manage the rent on her own since I had been covering most of it. On Monday, I returned to the apartment with 2 friends for support and to collect my belongings. While packing, I found a hotel receipt for a February trip she had claimed was a girls' weekend. The reservation was under her affair partner's name. That was the breaking point. I also discovered my grandmother's engagement ring in her jewelry box, confirming my worst fears. I left behind the furniture we bought together and any shared gifts, but the ring was mine. I immediately canceled the wedding, contacting the venue and vendors. Most were understanding, though I did lose several deposits. Then I messaged our friends who had received the save the dates, keeping the details vague but letting them know the wedding was off. My ex exploded with calls and texts, pleading for another chance, blaming me for not being present enough, insisting it was all a mistake. I blocked her number, but she began calling from different ones. She even came to my workplace and caused a scene in the lobby. The following day, she showed up at my sister's house, demanding to speak to me. When my sister told her to leave, she sat in her car outside for hours before finally driving off. Then she ambushed me at my regular coffee spot, sobbing and begging. I calmly told her the time to repair things was before she spent months betraying me. The hardest part has been watching mutual friends react. Some urged me to at least hear her out, while others stood firmly by me and cut ties with her completely. Even her parents called me, apologizing for their daughter's behavior. I reassured her father, it wasn't his fault. She made her own decisions. As for me, I focused on moving forward. I found a small but comfortable place of my own. Adjusting has been strange, but it feels good to finally have a space that's mine. Friends have been amazing, bringing meals, checking in, helping me settle. I never realized how many people truly cared until now. But the situation hasn't eased, it's escalated. Last Friday, while I was having dinner at my sister's, someone pounded on the door. It was my ex, hysterical, screaming so loudly the whole neighborhood could hear. She cried, "Please, I made a mistake." My sister tried calming her and asked her to leave, but she pushed past and stormed inside. Mascara streaked her face, her eyes wild with exhaustion. She immediately launched into excuses. The affair was only physical, she was confused, her coworker had pursued her, but she realized I was the one she truly loved. All I could think about was the smug look on his face in our bedroom. It was clear to me, I wasn't enough for her. I told her to leave, but she refused, growing frantic. In the chaos, she knocked a glass off the counter and it shattered. That's when my sister called the police. When they arrived, my ex tried playing the victim, claiming we wouldn't let her collect her things. But neighbors confirmed she'd been outside screaming for 20 minutes before barging in. The officers escorted her out and issued a trespass warning. The next day, I got an email from her affair partner. Apparently, she had told him she was ending things with him to get back with me, and he wasn't happy. He sent me screenshots of their conversations spanning nearly 6 months, not just the 4 she had admitted. I skipped over the explicit messages, But what cut me deepest were the countless texts where they mocked me. They laughed about my proposal, which I had carefully planned, and about how clueless I was. They even joked about how I believed she was my soulmate while they were together. One message from January was especially painful. It came right after I paid a $2,200 non-refundable deposit on the lakeside venue she had fallen in love with. In that message, they mocked me as a clueless fool. I forwarded everything to my lawyer, excluding the explicit photos, and then blocked the affair partner's email. Whether he meant to hurt her or me didn't matter. It only proved I'd made the right choice. A few nights later, close to midnight, my phone rang from an unknown number. Half asleep I answered, only to hear her sobbing uncontrollably. She said she'd been called into HR that day and fired. Apparently, their company had a strict no-relationship policy, and someone had sent HR photos of them making out in a supply closet during a company event. She immediately assumed I was behind it, accusing me of ruining her career as revenge. I told her I had nothing to do with it, but she didn't believe me. "You destroyed my life," she cried before hanging up. Not long after, her mother sent a group text asking both of us to meet with a mediator, for the sake of the 4 years together. Politely declined. There was nothing left to discuss. What was clear to me was that my ex wasn't sorry for betraying me. She was sorry she got caught and lost control. She wanted to keep both me and him until she decided who she preferred. Now that everything had collapsed, she wanted the stability I had given her. As for me, I focused on moving forward. I returned to work, joined a gym, and at a friend's suggestion, made a dating profile. I wasn't ready to date yet, but just the idea felt freeing. I gave the ring back to my mother, who hugged me tightly when I handed it over. Some mornings I'd wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there. Then I'd remember the texts where they mocked me as I planned our wedding, and any doubt about my decision vanished. 6 months later, I can say this chapter is finally closing. It's been a long journey. My ex eventually stopped harassing me after one last meltdown. She somehow discovered my new address. Later I learned my cousin mentioned it at his barbershop, where her brother also went. She showed up drunk at 1 a.m., pounding on my door, screaming insults, and threatening to call the cops on me. My neighbor filmed the entire scene. The next day, I hired a lawyer to send her a cease and desist with the video attached. That finally ended things. My friend Jake still runs into her old roommate at the gym. He told me that in August my ex and her coworker tried to make it work. They even moved in together, but it lasted barely 5 weeks before she caught him cheating with the HR rep. She reportedly went ballistic, trashed his Xbox, and moved back in with her parents. When I heard, I felt nothing, just mild curiosity. Couple months later, I bumped into her at Target. She looked thin, restless, pushing her cart back and forth like she couldn't decide whether to speak. Finally she muttered, "Hey," in a small voice I barely recognized. I said, "Hey," back and kept walking. It felt strange but empty. No anger, no pity, just an awkward discomfort, like running into an old coworker you never really liked. Meanwhile, life has taken unexpected but positive turns. The temporary apartment I'd been renting was under renovation, and while complaining about the drywall, I struck up a conversation with a contractor, who turned out to be the owner of a construction company. After talking, he offered me a job. Since July, I've been working there with better pay and a normal 40-hour week instead of grinding out 60-hour weeks at my old desk job. That same month, I ran into my sister's neighbor at a small venue for an obscure post-rock band I love. We started chatting, exchanged numbers, and began hanging out. It turned into coffee, then beers, then dinners. We've been dating since August, and it's been refreshingly different. We actually communicate about tough topics without blame. Even small things like her asking about my boundaries with male friends feel so simple, but were impossible with my ex. I've also reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with. One of them recently told me it feels like the real me is back. As for the $2,200 venue deposit, I had written it off as a loss, until last month when the venue manager called. They'd had a cancellation for a fundraiser for children with cancer and applied my deposit to cover it. I received a tax receipt, and the kids and their families enjoyed a beautiful day by the lake. It was the first time I genuinely smiled about anything wedding-related since all this began. Of course, anger still hits me sometimes, especially when I remember specific moments. Her excitement about cake tastings while secretly texting him. The Christmas gift she gave me while they were already involved. It makes me question how much of it was real. But I know I dodged a bullet. It could have been divorce papers instead of a cancelled lease, with children caught in the mess. One of my college friends is living through exactly that right now. Last month, I saw my ex again at a mutual friend's birthday. She looked worn down, but I felt nothing except a faint sadness for what might have been if she'd been the person I thought she was. I won't pretend everything is perfect. Some days still hit hard, but most days don't. I've got a better job, a smaller but cozier home, and someone new who doesn't make me feel like I'm one mistake away from being replaced. That's really it. Just a guy who found out his fiancée was cheating, walked away, and lived to tell the story.